Now, military influence was huge in the fashion world, okay? Remember in World War I how trench coats came into fashion? Well, the same thing happened here. So, rationing influenced design details and lengths of clothing and accessories, of course. Jobs influenced what could and could not be worn, like with women specifically. And new clothing items were made for military men, and it was adopted by the general public. And I bet you have something that a president designed. So, women, they were an inverted triangle. Shoulder pads were popular. Okay, that's what was popular in the 1940s. This made the shoulders appear wider than the waist, and it created that inverted triangle silhouette. Convertible suits became very popular. So this is our first really mix and match outfit, okay? They came with one or two additional pieces in order to create more outfit choices. So maybe you buy a blue convertible suit and it's going to have a blue skirt with a blue jacket. Maybe it's a dress, okay? But you're going to have about one or two different pieces. Maybe it's a different skirt, maybe it's a different colored jacket, or it has a print on it even, that you can mix and match to create more outfits with. So here you can see a really good example of that. So you can see we've got a different color hat, matches the jacket, the skirt, and then you've got this overcoat. Here, kind of the same thing, jacket, skirt, color jacket, different type of blouse. These are what convertible suits were like. So I'm going to go ahead and play a little video about women workers in the 1940s for you.
So you grew up here?
Gladys with them?
That's me.
You can't wear your street shoes in the office. You got nails in the soles, you get sparks.
Ugh, these are some gruesome twosomes.
Now your ring.
This is my engagement ring.
I don't care if it's the Hope Diamond, those are the rules. No cigarettes, no lighters, nothing that can spark. You'll get it back at shift's end.
I'll leave it at home tomorrow.
Sure, if you ever make it back. Wait for me in there.
Ready? Morning. Morning. Here's the deal, ladies. You do fine embroidery, you can assemble a time fuse. If you sew buttons, you can thread a detonator. If you can pour tea, you can pour Amatol. It's no big whoop. Except some folks don't see it that way. The guys are crapping bullets, afraid they might not get their easy street jobs back after you've helped them win the war. You ignore them first, talk tough second. That doesn't work, you slap them silly.
Miss Witham.
I've seen your files. You've all had the same good training as they have. Kate Andrews, what about you?
Yes, here. Here are my papers.
Okay, then. Now, unless it's lunch or tea break, you do not leave your station until the next shift arrives. We're fighting Jerry's here, ladies. And trust me, Fritz ain't resting. Now get busy.
Rosie the Riveter is the female icon of World War II. She is the home front equivalent of G.I. Joe. She represents any woman defense worker.
The artist Norman Rockwell is closely associated with Rosie, but how many of you have heard of J. Howard Miller? Yet it was Miller who created this image. I found something unexpected when I turned to Norman Rockwell's Rosie. It appeared on the cover of the Saturday Evening Post on May 29th, 1943, the Memorial Day issue. This was not the tidy image in my mind. This Rosie is brawny and larger than life.
In my surprise at the two images, I decided to look into the development of the myth of Rosie the Riveter. The chronology isn't always clear, but it seems that about 1942, an artist at Westinghouse named J. Howard Miller created We Can Do It, probably as part of his company's war work. the federal government encouraged industries to try to get more people to go to work. We Can Do It initially had no connection with someone named Rosie. All the day long, whether rain or shine, she's a part of the assembly line. She's making history, working for victory, Rosie the Riveter. Keeps a sharp lookout for sabotage, sitting up there on the fuselage. That little girl will do more than a male will do. And skipping to the end, there's something true about, red, white, and blue about, Rosie the Riveter. So you have this song appearing in early 1943, then a few months later, on May 29th, you get the Rockwell cover. It seems likely that Rockwell had heard the song since he wrote the name Rosie on the lunchbox in his picture.
The press picked up the story of a woman named Rose Hickey. She and her partner drove a record number of rivets into the wing of a TBM Avenger at a Tarrytown, New York plant. Other women named Rose gained media attention before the end of the war. Rose Monroe, a riveter in Michigan, made a film about selling war bonds and then a commercial movie called Rosie the Riveter.
Sybil Lewis gives this description of riveting.
The women worked in pairs. I was the riveter, and this big, strong white girl from a cotton farm in Arkansas worked as the bucker. The riveter used a gun to shoot rivets through the metal and fasten it together. The bucker used a bucking bar on the other side of the metal to smooth out the rivets. Bucking was harder than shooting rivets. It required more muscle. Riveting required more skill.
While the Rockwell image was widely disseminated during the war, later copyright restrictions meant it was less frequently reproduced. The Miller image was without such restraints and appears everywhere. When I went looking, I found plenty of facts about these women. The big changes that brought them into war work began in 1942. Men were going to war and industries were switching to war production. When in need, industries decided they were willing to hire women. After all, they wouldn't get drafted. At first, there was lots of reluctance on parts of managers, husbands, male workers, and many women too. Where did the women workers come from? It seems they came from three main groups. First, women already working changed to the higher-paying, patriotic defense jobs. So many women left laundries in 1942 that 600 closed. The second group included women who had worked but lost their jobs during the Depression or when their factories converted from civilian to war work. And the third group, which attracted the most attention, was first-time workers. About 6 million women entered the workforce for the first time. Many of these were married, white, middle-class women who had to be encouraged to go out to work. Working outside the home was a new idea for them.
To motivate them, between 1942 and 1944, there was what's been called an intense courtship of women by employers and government. The U.S. Office of War Information produced a magazine war guide, which gave publishers of magazines ideas, information, and slogans for their publications.
This was a government-led effort to recruit women workers, to get women out of the home. Magazines were to write articles that appealed to the desire for glamour and good pay, but even more to patriotism. Women, you could hasten victory by working and save your man. Rosie's appearance on the Memorial Day cover of the Saturday Evening Post implied that her work might help save soldiers' lives. For September 1943, the magazine War Guide recommended that all magazines participate in a Women at Work cover promotion. This was to emphasize that many kinds of employment, not just defense and factory work, were war jobs.
The guide gave examples such as women grocery clerks, elevator operators, telephone operators, farmers, ticket agents, and many others, saying that if women didn't do them, quote, our civilian life would break down. These were necessary civilian jobs, and women were to be urged to take them. The slogan for this promotion was, "The more women at work, the sooner we win." For its part in this campaign, the Saturday Evening Post turned again to Norman Rockwell. Rockwell showed a Liberty Girl with the tools of a great many civilian jobs. This woman in patriotic clothes is a nurse, a farmer, a conductor, a mechanic, a telephone operator, and many other things. Most people aren't familiar with this image, which appeared only 3 months after Rosie. It just hasn't resonated the same way.
There is still much debate on the long-term effects of women's war work on the position of women after the war. Did their working sow the seeds of the second wave of feminism? Maybe, but Betty Friedan's Feminine Mystique isn't published till 1963. Did women return to their homes and families and become 1950s TV mothers like June Cleaver on Leave It to Beaver? No. The number of working women never again fell to pre-war levels.
The recognition that middle-class married women could work and run a home was significant. Of course, poorer women had always done so. The women themselves tell us some of the effects.
My mother warned me when I took the job that I would never be the same. She said, "You will never want to go back to being a housewife." At that time, I didn't think it would change a thing, but she was right, it definitely did. At Boeing, I found a freedom and an independence that I had never known. After the war, I could never go back to playing bridge again, being a club woman, when I knew there were things you could use your mind for. The war changed my life completely. I guess you could say at 31, I finally grew up. Inez Sauer, Boeing tool clerk.
You came out to California, put on your pants, and took your lunch pail to a man's job. This was the beginning of women's feeling that they could do something more. Sybil Lewis, Lockheed Riveter.
So, slacks for women. They were a popular men's item up until the early 1940s, at which time women started to wear them out of necessity. Remember that military influence, okay? So, slacks at that time didn't have a specific waist size. Instead, it was one size fit all, and it required belts or suspenders to keep them up, and they were typically really baggy, especially on women. And they were considered a fine alternative to trousers for a lot of women in the 1940s, and they became acceptable for women to wear in the factories and at their jobs, but not really for social events or evening parties. So this was only something that they did at work. Men's fashion. Men at that time still went for that rectangular silhouette, okay? And when I said that you might have something in your closet that a president had designed, I wasn't kidding. So the Eisenhower Ike jacket, okay, President Eisenhower, he was an army general during World War II, okay? He later became president of the United States from 1953 until 1961, and these are also known as bomber jackets, okay? And they are still popular today. This feature included a fitted and belted waist with extra fabric in the chest area so it would blouse out. So the reason why this was so popular is because of bombers, okay? It gave you a little bit of warmth when you were riding in that cockpit, and it didn't get in the way. That was the purpose of the bomber jacket. Victory suits also became very popular for men. So the American Victory suit, which was also known as the utility suit in England, it was made out of a wool synthetic blend, okay? The reason why it was made out of a wool synthetic blend instead of 100% wool like in the past is because it reduced the amount of natural materials that was needed to make it. It was defined more by what it didn't have than what it had because it lacked a lot. That military influence changed design details, remember? So it didn't have a vest, it was a two-piece suit. It didn't really have any cuffs or pocket flaps, okay? The jacket was shorter than what it had been in the past, and really this has changed how jackets are today. The pants didn't have any pleats or cuffs, and they were narrower. And the suits weren't sold with an additional pair of pants like they had been previously, pre-war. Okay, there was even a strict limit on zippers or buttons, which weren't used unless absolutely necessary. They weren't supposed to be putting them into these suits unless they were absolutely necessary for the suit to actually zip up or button up. And both single-breasted and double-breasted suits were popular. The double-breasted suit aided in the wide fit, so that rectangular shape that men were going for. And the single-breasted suit was slimmer, but it still had really wide notch lapels. And the double-breasted usually had peak lapels. So we can see I have a double-breasted and a single-breasted here for you guys to look at. So remember, this is the notch lapel. This is also a type of notch lapel, but do you see how it goes into a peak? It's a little bit different here. Okay guys, that's the 1940s for you. I hope you enjoyed this.